I wanted to get honest with you here. We've reached a time in history when managing through fear and intimidation, command and control power structures, and do as I say ways of managing no longer work. To speed up the effectiveness of your leadership team and the growth of your business, there's a much better way of leading. Now, as many of you know, I speak often at company events and conferences all over the world. If you bring me to speak at your event, you're going to discover the evidence-based leadership practices that result in a positive, engaging, and high-performing organization. Leaders will walk away with a practical framework to help design the best work environment for their people to flourish. Because when they do, your business will flourish as well. To find out more about my speaking engagements, workshops, and keynotes, visit my website, marcelschwantes.com, and click on Speaking.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, glad you could join us, and thank you for spending time with us today. We would be even more grateful if you could spread the love by sharing this episode with a friend and leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast. So here's what's on my mind today. The last 3 years, we have witnessed phenomenons like, the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. People have woken up to the fact that they have a choice, and they're choosing more and more to avoid workplaces that don't value them as human beings. Global management firm, consulting firm, I should say, McKinsey, they shared in one of their surveys that 55% of employees would describe their boss as, quote, mildly or highly toxic. They also said that 75% of employees describe interacting with their boss as the most stressful part of the day. That's just McKinsey. In my line of work as a coach, I've been seeing these stats for decades. I've read exit interview reports and engagement surveys. Folks, this is not new. We've known this to be true before, social media invented these trendy terms that I just mentioned. For more than 20 years, the Gallup organization has been researching what makes for a highly engaged employee, right? We've seen their stats. Usually, employee engagement or disengagement hovers, or I should say engagement actually hovers around 30 to 33%. So one of their famous and maybe even controversial questions to assess engagement is this one. Do you have a best friend at work? That turns off a lot of CEOs because, to them, you're supposed to discourage friendships to develop at work so you can get the work done, right? That's an interesting question that deserves more scrutiny because they may not be the right question to ask. And we're going to get into that, why that is. And I'm going to bring in my guest today to talk about friendships at work. And more importantly, in today's age of Zoom calls and slacking and in hybrid workplaces, how leaders can actually foster real relationships that allow for everyone to succeed. So, I get a lot of books. I have stacks of books from PR companies trying to get their clients in the door. About 80% of those books don't align with the theme of the show. Hey, I'm being honest here. But this book does, big time. This new release is called You, Me, We: Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One. The authors, they gathered data from speaking with hundreds of leaders around the world to discover the 5 practices of an ally mindset. Allyship is big here. We've brought on guests to talk about the importance of being an ally in the workplace. We need more allies to counter the very things that McKinsey talked about, toxicity, but also things like loneliness and burnout, right? So we're going to guide you into being that ally for each other. And if you're a boss, for your employees. Because listen here, okay? Relationships in the workplace are made or broken one conversation at a time. I love that line. It came from the book. I'm wondering that line has resonated with some of you. You know, as human beings, we crave connection, right? I mean, it's kind of built deep into our DNA. What I know, and I think you'll agree with me, is that we are much more effective when we are closer, when we are for each other, when we got each other's backs, when we're together, not separate or alienated or operating in silos. So today, you have the opportunity to get some insight to help create high performance teams and, hey, become a great boss if you're listening. So Morag Barrett, one of the co-authors of You, Me, We, she's going to join us shortly. Morag is a sought-out executive coach and leadership expert. Her company, Sky Team, have supported the development of more than 10,000 leaders from 20 countries and on 6 continents. She's the award-winning author of other books you may have heard, like Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships, The Future-Proof Workplace, and of course, her latest, You, Me, We. She's recognized by Thinkers 360 and People Hum as the HR thought leader to watch. And I'm honored that she took the time to stop in and chat with us. Morag now joins us. Welcome, Morag, to the Love in Action podcast.
Marcel, I'm so excited for the conversation. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Morag, I booked Morag, I don't know what, 5 months ago? And
it feels like that, a lifetime. Feels like that.
And here you are. So I so appreciate your patience. So we start with this. You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
What's your story?
See, that makes me laugh. When you said you were going to open with what's your story, I want to start with some dramatic music and once upon a time in a land far, far away, which is not too far from the truth, because from the accent, those who are listening or watching, I was born in the UK, but I'm now based in the US, live in Colorado, and I've had the opportunity to work with leaders on North Slope, Alaska. I've been down to Chile and Peru, and I've been around the world. And that's kind of my story. I'm an adventurer. I'm highly curious. I wanted to be an engineer, ended up in finance, looked at the numbers side of business, lending millions of pounds to all sorts of companies at different stages of their life cycle, and realized that the spreadsheet was only half of the equation. In fact, it's only a third of the equation, because if it was as easy as a cash flow forecast, every company would be successful. And what I realized was that the missing ingredient was how business gets done, and investing as much time and effort in the what we do and how we organize, in the who we are and how we relate, which is why I pivoted into leadership and executive development and the books that you mentioned. And in my spare time, I'm a ballroom dancer, a classical musician, and the mother to 3 sons who are now 6 foot tall, AKA not little kids.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. All right. We've had books about, common themes around friendship and allyship, but so tell us, why this book? Why now?
So it's interesting because I have a whole shelf full and more of books on a similar theme. As we were doing the research for You, Me, We were voracious in reading perspectives and informing our thought process. But it's something that's always bubbled under the surface for me growing up, but also in work. So growing up, I'll go back to my dad, who seemed to know everybody. It didn't matter where we went, he would bump into somebody he knew. And it's now happening to me. And I use the phrase in the book that we've given LinkedIn and technology, the endless Slack conversations, email, etc., that you mentioned in the introduction. We're literally only 2 clicks away from talking to anybody we might need to. So forget 6 degrees of connection. It's 2 degrees of connection if we're being intentional. But also in terms of this, why now? Because I think also with the pandemic, it has done a doozy on the quality of many of our professional relationships. And we can do fake perky through the camera for the 30 minutes. But when we hit that red button, if at the end you're sitting there going, oh, I can't believe they just asked me to do that, or we're struggling with whatever may be happening in our lives, but presenting that professional face, then we're missing an opportunity to deepen our relationships, build the trust and connection we need in order to succeed in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the data? I saw that you have researched by talking with 100, I think it was 500 executives around the world, but you've done workshops and training as well globally. So when you gathered all of that, what did you find?
Well, so this book, You, Me, We, is the sequel to my first book. So Cultivate the Power of Winning Relationships. Here's one I happened to have earlier. Introduce what I call the relationship ecosystem, 4 relationship dynamics that we can experience in our professional lives. And it ranges from allies, our best friends at work, the people who have your back no matter what. And it's easy to be an ally on the good day. The true test is when the proverbial hits the fan, who's willing to give you the tough feedback or the kick in the pants, who's willing to roll up their sleeves and help you out of that pickle. You have supporters who are fair weather friends. So when the going gets tough, it's crickets. They're not going to put their head over the parapet and take a risk for you. They'll give you the feedback you want to hear, not the feedback you need to hear. And then we move to what I call the dark side, rivals, a little bit more elbow jockeying, Jekyll and Hyde. When it suits their agenda, they're all for you, go Marcel. And when it doesn't, they're against you. So of course, in the short term, you raise your game because maybe you prepare and over prepare and practice for the meeting. But again, long term, it's toxic, it's insidious.
Yeah.
And then finally, adversaries. At best, brilliant jerks. At worst, just jerks. They're the tough relationships that all you know is every time you show up, you're batting heads. So that was book number 1. So why You, Me, We? Well, we were asked, I love Cultivate. I understand now my stakeholders. I understand the health of the relationships. But how do I show up as an ally? So that's where we went deeper in our research. We'd been talking about in our Cultivate at Work programs, we'd interviewed and had participants talk about what it looks like and what it doesn't when you have an ally. And we went deeper, and we've had now nearly 1,000 leaders take our ally mindset profile. And I invite listeners here, if you go to Skye Team, SKYE, team.cloud/You, Me, We, you will be taken straight to the ally mindset profile, and you can help us to continue our research. But here's the sad picture. You talked about some of the Gallup data and the McKinsey data about interacting with our boss, and 75% of people say that's the most stressful part of their day. Well, our research shows that 20% of leaders say that they have no friends at work, not one. Imagine that for a moment. On those tough days, you've got nobody you can turn to for advice or guidance. And 67%, this is what knocked my socks off, 67% are saying that their success has been undermined by the words or actions of a colleague. So think about that, Marcel. That impacts all of us. If 2/3 are either being perceived or misperceived as doing the undermining, or we're being undermined, then heaven heck, we all need to be paying attention to the quality of our relationships at work.
That's fascinating. So I want to clear that Gallup question out of the way right off the bat here, because you bring that question up, in the first couple of chapters of your book. So if you're familiar with the Q12, one of Gallup's questions to assess employee engagement is, do you have a best friend at work? I mentioned it in my introduction. You propose that's the wrong question to ask. Why?
I know, isn't it? That's a bit and bold, I think. Well, I remember when it came out, and you said it in the introduction, that it gets the biggest pushback from leaders. And I remember thinking, oh, ridiculous. And in finance, being told, hey, it's not personal, it's just business. Well, I'll tell you now, that's BS. All business is personal. So that question, it was interesting, but the reason I reacted so strongly to it, and why my co-authors and I decided to reframe it, is that it's passive. When I say, do I have a best friend at work, it allows me to sit there and go, well, no, because Marcel got the promotion I should have done, or Marcel's team got to do the glamorous project. And it allows me to sit back and be more of a victim. So in You, Me, We, what we're doing is empowering all of us to go first. Because instead of asking, do I have a best friend at work? The question is, am I a friend at work?
So basically, it's the only way you can ensure that you have a best friend at work. We're not throwing out the Gallup question, but to ensure that it works is to be that best friend at work. So really, you're putting it on yourself.
Yes. And you said it earlier, our relationships are made or destroyed one conversation at a time. Right. So being intentional about how we show up in this conversation, how we show up in our next meeting, how we show up for family and friends, this goes broader than the workplace, though that is our area of expertise and our focus. So if you want to have those allies, if you want to know who you can call on in the middle of the night when you wake up, with heartburn over your project, or who can you go to for advice when you get that next promotion and you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, I've got no idea what to do next. The time to invest in your relationships is today, before you need anybody.
I love that you said that it's kind of like, we need to stop being the victim, because there are things that are going to happen in the workplace that we're not going to like, right? And in our minds, we may interpret it as several things, favoritism, whatever. But it's putting the onus back on you to reframe situations at work. To me, it's by saying, okay, how can I still contribute to being a really good worker or coworker, colleague, right? Even though the outcome of this situation didn't work to my advantage, I can still contribute in other ways by, being that best friend. So I love it. We have to kind of get over our shortcomings, get over ourselves to be able to keep generating that best friend aspect, but it starts with us first. Maybe it's being resilient enough to bounce back from a negative situation and never look at your colleague in a negative light and then hold that resentment, because you're not going to be a best friend to anybody if you're holding on to anger and resentment because, the person next to you got the promotion and you didn't.
Yeah, it's turning it. I was just watching Brene Brown talk on that very topic, that anger and resentment is like holding a knife to your own throat. It doesn't benefit anybody, but reflecting on what can I learn and how can I adjust. And I can remember early in my career sitting there, BMWing, bitching, moaning and whining because somebody else had got a role that I'd wanted. It took me a while to get there because I was early in my career and a little less experience. But on reflection, what I realized was I'd never actually told anybody that I wanted that role, that I was interested. I was hoping that the quality of my work would demonstrate my readiness for that promotion. And if anybody listening is doing that, well, I'll just continue to do a good job and I'll work hard and I'll run faster. It is an approach, but my experience is that that does not work. You need to be tapping into your network. The more people who know what you aspire to, the more people who have skin in the game to help you to realize those dreams and those opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. So this is when we get to maybe put that label of ally mindset is, when you start to be the best friend at work and everyone else is elevating their game to become that person as well. We become allies for each other, right?
It's hashtag better together every time. And that's why the foundational practice for this is abundance and generosity. Because when we can look at success as an infinite resource, and I appreciate there's only one CEO seat in your organization, so that is a scarce resource in that company. But when you look at companies in general, there are many CEO seats. So it's about building the skill set, because I've seen too much internal politics, silos and turf wars take down organizations, teams and individual career reputations. And if we can get past that to what can we do together to move us forward, then we all benefit. With one caveat, that being a friend at work does not mean that I necessarily want to take you home to meet my mother, that we are going to be bound to each other for life. But it does mean that for this project, for this organization, that we can work respectfully together to achieve the same end result that ultimately means success for all.
Yeah, I'm glad that you differentiated that, because immediately a lot of people, when you hear best friend, is, oh no, I don't want to have to get to know this person and have to do happy hour. And now I'm going to their kids' baseball games on Sunday, right? we're focusing on how to be an ally and a best friend during a business setting to achieve a common purpose together.
Yeah, and if it bleeds over into social life and rest of life, then yay, go you. However, it is still an opportunity for us to focus on, well, what are your hot buttons? What's going to get in the way of the success? Where are you feeling lack of confidence? Where do you need extra support? So that, again, we can achieve those goals more effortlessly together.
Right. And it's funny because to me, it's natural human nature that if you are building allyship and you're having good relationships at work, why wouldn't you want to spend maybe some extra time with these people outside of work as well, right? It would foster that relationship to be even stronger when you come back on Monday to create things together, I think.
Well, it goes back to, do you look forward to going into work, or is it, oh gosh, another millstone day? And we present 4 questions that we're asking ourselves consciously or subconsciously in every interaction. The first one is, can I count on you? Can I count on you to get your stuff done and back to me on time so I can get my to-do list done? The next question is, can I depend on you? And depend on you is the proactive. Can I expect you to go the extra mile to fix the error in the spreadsheet, or to point out the typo, or to give me the coaching and mentoring I need? Both of those are kind of transactional, and often leaders will tell me, well, you just go and do your job, prove to me that you're trustworthy, and we'll be okay. But by the way, it's going to take you a year, 2 years to get to that point. And in finance, that's where many of the relationships I was working with stopped and started. The transactional, can I count on you? Can I depend on you? But within you, me, we talk about 2 more questions, the transformational questions. Do I care about you? Which goes straight to the theme of your podcast. It's akin to, do I love you? But in an HR and professional appropriate way. So do I care about you, and do I trust you? And both of those are emotional at their heart, and they go beyond just getting to know you for your business skills and job title. It's getting to know a little bit of your story, as you asked at the beginning of the podcast. Who are you as a human being, and what is your backstory? Because there are going to be talents and insights and inspiration that you can tap into there that if you aren't curious about, you're going to miss.
Yeah. Let's skim the surface of what an ally is, or, if you want to put it another way, how can we be a best friend at work? This is before we dive into your framework of the 5 practices, but give us an idea. I mean, how will I know I'm being an ally?
All right. So I've got 2 parts to this question, or to this answer. The first one is, when you leave the room, when you announce you're moving on to pastures new, is there a collective sigh of relief from the organization and your team, or and then people carry on about their business? So first of all, that could be a simple pulse check. Are people going to give a sigh of relief or a sigh of, I'm going to miss you? But the other way of knowing whether or not you're ally, here's the second part, is you do this for me now, Marcel. Think about somebody from your life, your career, who you would jump at the chance to work with again. And everybody listening and watching this, do the same. Who's coming to mind? So who's coming to mind for you, Marcel?
It was the first boss that I worked with that I put the label on him as a servant leader, and his name was Bruce.
Bruce. Hey, Bruce. Well, so tell me a little bit more about Bruce. He's a servant leader. What made him special and stand out for you?
Wow. Of the plethora of things I could mention about Bruce, one of the things was that he always made time available to sit down with us. This was a CEO, and I was at that time a director, being groomed into an executive role, but he would just spend time with us and kind of just pour into us, and speak into us. So that's what I remember the most.
Oh my goodness. So I love that, because that connects to the, do I care about you? He cared because he just spent time sharing his expertise with you.
Exactly.
All right. So there's a punchline again for everybody listening, for you. To the extent you can, I want you to send Bruce, or your own Bruce if you're listening in, a LinkedIn message, a text message, an email, a message to the universe that says, hey, I was listening to Love in Action. I was asked to think about colleagues I'd jump at the chance to work with again, and I thought about you. And here's why. Do it. Double dog dare you. Do it. And I asked some leaders to do this just last month. They were tech leaders. So use whatever generic stereotyping you want. These were highly educated IT leaders. And you could see them going, oh, that's a bit touchy-feely. But they did, because as facilitator, I get a lot of power when I say, we'll send the message. And there were 2 stories I want to share that just show the power of just saying, hey, I see you. The first, a leader who followed up after the program that I was leading, and he called or sent a message to an old colleague. The following week, they had a 90-minute call. They reconnected. And heartbreakingly, 2 weeks later, that person passed away. So the leader in my program called me and he said, had you not challenged us to do it, I would never have had that opportunity to reconnect and to let him know what an impact he'd had on me and my career. The second story, again, I work a lot with IT engineering leaders, but it doesn't really matter. But this leader sent a message to their current boss. And think about it, as you move through your career, that sort of feedback becomes less frequent. There is an implicit assumption that you know you're doing a good job, or there's an implicit assumption that if you aren't, somebody else is telling you. But this leader sent a text to her current boss. And I'll ask people, when you get a reply, let us know. Well, they got a reply, and it was a long missive, essentially like, oh my goodness, you've made my day. You don't realize just how important your message was. I had just had some bad news. Thank you. So this is now being read out to the 20 of us. So we're getting goosebumps because this person got a reply. 15 minutes later, we get another text from that leader going, I can't stop thinking about your message. I'm just going to have to tell my husband when we get home tonight. So now it's not just that the individual to their boss, it's back to the 20 of us, and now it's back to the social life and the family life. When we say thank you, when we acknowledge others' contributions, it makes a difference. So again, for everybody listening, I double dog dare you, send the message to your ally, think about what made them special, and chances are that overlaps with the 5 practices of an ally mindset. Certainly from our research, as we collected all of these stories of who stands out for you and distilled it down to, well, what can we all do in how we show up every day to role model and be an ally for others and be an ally and a best friend for ourselves.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And this is a perfect segue to those 5 practices of the ally mindset. So let's break them down into parts. Okay. So I'll go by the order that I saw in the book, and then talk a little bit about it. And maybe if you have an illustration, we love stories to back up that particular segment. So the first part of the ally mindset is abundance and generosity. What did you find?
So abundance and generosity, you think about Bruce, the one who sat down and poured his expertise into you and shared time. Abundance and generosity is giving. It is seeing resources as infinite and how can I be of assistance? Now, with all of these, they can be overplayed strengths. Abundance and generosity is my default operating system for the world. And it has 2 downsides. One is I can be so eager to help. You can come to me and say, hey, I have a problem with. And before you've even told me what the with is, I've got 100 ideas for you. So I have learned I need to slow down and listen and then just check in with you. Do you need me to solve? Do you need me to coach you? Or do you want me to just listen? Because my default action is to jump to action and try to solve for you. So abundance and generosity is about giving. And the second guardrail that I've learned at my own cost here as well is that you need to define what you are able to give in the moment. Because continually saying yes to others means that you're saying no to other things and to yourself.
Right.
And so making sure that your priorities so that you can articulate and say, well, Marcel, I'd love to help. I can't do it this week, but maybe next week. And that's how you get to the win-win versus you putting your hand up and volunteering and then sitting there going like, no, I can't believe I said yes again. Or Marcel doesn't appreciate, but I never actually articulated all of the other priorities that I'm fitting that request into. Yeah. So abundance and generosity. Do you give first or do you take first? And are you giving within guardrails so that you can make sure that you are at your best to enable you and others to be at their best?
Right. I love a couple of things that come up for me is not to be, don't give to be a people pleaser, because that way you're going to burn yourself out. So that's a lack of boundaries. And give to help make other people better, I think.
Yes.
So I think of giving in the form of mentorship, right? Or mentoring, right? Spend like Bruce did. Bruce would sit down with me and mentor me. And I'm sure that he took the time, he had, built that in to his schedule. It's not that he was taking extra time. He just knew that that was important enough for our development. So it was already baked into his schedule.
Yes.
And he was that kind of giver.
And abundance and generosity is also, it connects. I know you've had previous guests talk about psychological safety. And so as part of that, giving the benefit of the doubt, assuming positive intent, because let's face it, nobody, well, very few, 0.01% get up in the morning and think, hey, I want to do an average job today. Or you know what, even better, I'm going to try and make the biggest mistake I can and really wreck Marcel's day. And if we are approaching our relationships with abundance and generosity and giving the benefit of the doubt, even when mistakes happen, it allows us to then move to the second element, which is connection and compassion, to ask questions in a way that are more empathetic, that cause people to lean in and own what may have happened, whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly, versus pretending and trying to minimize it or sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah. Well, okay. So speaking of the second practice of an ally mindset, you mentioned connection and compassion. Anything else that we should know really to kind of zero in on what that is?
So connection and compassion is getting to the story. How did you get to where you are today? Where have you been to school? Where have you lived and worked? What do you do for fun outside of work? What are your hobbies and interests? And creating a container and an opportunity for us to connect at a human level. That's the do I care about you and do I trust you I mentioned earlier on, and not just down at the work level. Can I count on you and depend on you? Where is that spreadsheet? How's the PowerPoint coming on? Have you closed that deal yet? Because that just diminishes our ability to pull together, especially in rocky times. Yeah. So connection and compassion is curiosity bound. It is empathy bound, and getting to know us beyond the job title or the name badge we may be wearing today.
Tell me if I'm tracking with the compassion side of connection and compassion, because to me, lots of times we are overburdened with a task that we can't take on, or it's beyond our capacity to do it on our own, and we need help. And so I'm thinking that as an ally, you come to, I don't want to say rescue, because that sounds, that's not the right term, but I want to say that you come along somebody, recognize that somebody is stressed and overburdened, and you're there to help kind of relieve them and maybe kind of ease the suffering in that moment, whether it's a task or a challenging project, or, you're having a bad day. Okay, what can I take off your plate, Mr. or Mrs. Colleague? Okay. So is that speaking to compassion? Because I see compassion as sort of empathy on steroids, where there's action behind it.
So they're all connected, and action and accountability is the fifth element. So you've got to have them all in play in order to be an ally. But let me give you a personal example. We call them practices because even though I've written 2 books on this topic, like all of us, I'm human, and there are some that come naturally to me, abundance and generosity. But candor and debate, related to the business, absolutely. Related to tough feedback to you, I'm a big scaredy cat. And for connection and compassion, your question specifically, Eric Spencer, one of my best friends at work, so Eric Spencer and Ruby Vesely, the 3 of us wrote You Be We. We live and breathe this every day. And Eric talks quite openly about the fact that he suffers from depression. And in fact, in the book, he talks about the first time he told Ruby and I that is what he had. And he was so afraid, based on past experiences and social norms, that this was going to land badly for him. And it didn't. And so on the days where he is struggling, then Ruby and I can step up with connection and compassion to carry the load, because I can guarantee And there have been days when I am going to struggle and he will pick up the load for me. But being able to ask for help, being able to give help and accept it, that only comes when we have that human connection. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that our standards drop. We can still hold each other accountable for the high quality programs and work that we do with our clients. But we also give ourselves the space and grace to take our foot off the gas, to have an off day and allow somebody else to take the lead, to be in the limelight so that we can recharge our batteries and come back more powerfully the next day, the next time, the next week.
Ooh, I'm thinking that in a culture of allyship and a culture of people are being best friends to each other, there's very little room for your peer or coworker to try to take advantage of you. In an allyship model, a culture, you do it willingly. You are there for each other. So if you're going to help me today, because I can't handle this task, it's an expectation that tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to do it willingly. I'm going to do something for you willingly, right? Because we're all co-contributors.
Yes, co-contributors. And there's a reciprocal piece to this, but it's not a quid pro quo, because as allies, I'm not keeping score. Now, Adam Grant wrote about this, and we quote him a number of times in the book, Love the Research, give and take. If over time I'm the only one giving and you're the only one, you're only forever taking, then there is an imbalance. But this comes back to me defining my expectations. And did I articulate the how we're going to work together? And maybe it needs recalibrating. And that gets to the third practice, courage and vulnerability.
Okay.
Because you think about it, the conversations you had with Amy Gallo and with other guests around psychological safety, if we don't have a we first mindset, abundance and generosity, if we aren't connecting and with compassion, so you, me, we again, then you're not going to get to courage and vulnerability. And courage and vulnerability is key if you're looking for innovation and informed risk-taking and creativity at work. You're not going to get honest feedback, candor and debate, the next one, without courage and vulnerability. But you said in your introduction, like CEOs, do I need a friend at work? I would say that we all need it, but especially at the senior levels. Because think about it, without courage and vulnerability, your direct reports are not going to give you warnings of impending disaster. And therefore, your career is at risk. Yeah, if I do speak up, there is some risk to me because you're my boss. You could fire me if you don't like the message or the messenger. But if we don't build a culture that allows for courage and vulnerability and informed risk-taking, then all you're going to get is average and status quo and problems swept under the carpet until such time as they explode as unfortunate headlines, either in the internal memo or in the external news.
Yeah. All right, let's segue to the fourth practice. Have we touched enough on courage and vulnerability?
So we've done abundance, abundance and generosity, connection and compassion, courage and vulnerability. And you'll notice they're all double-barreled, and that's intentional. And then that leads to candor and debate.
Right. That's the first person that pops into my mind is Kim Scott, who wrote Radical Candor.
Yes.
Yes. So, and who we've been trying to get on the show for 2 years now. She's a busy gal.
In demand. But again, great insights. And here's the thing. We all say, I was working with a team of senior executives last year, and we got onto the subject of feedback. And it was interesting because the first leader said, oh, yeah, just give it to me straight. And then the second leader was, started getting a bit like this. It was like, no, give me a punch between the eyes. Obviously, metaphorical punch. And then the other one was, no, you can give me a straight between the eyes, but a kick in the pants. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more like, ugh. And it got to the last person and his head was in his hands. And he said, guys, if you do that to me, you'll destroy me. If you tell me my baby's ugly, I have put heart and soul into building this code and this product. It will destroy me. And then you could feel like a pinprick. The air went out of the room. And then it was like, you all went back. Can I take my answer back? And we had the most powerful conversation around candor and what does it look like at that leadership team level, how to give it, how to receive it, and how to come back from it when it lands inelegantly. And that's the key. Candor is only the first part. And if all you're doing is pulling the pin on the candor grenade, lobbing it into the conversation and watching the melee ensue, that's not an ally mindset. You have to then lean it into the debate and the conversation that follows. One that allows us to get to a greater shared understanding. Even if we end up still disagreeing, when we leave the room, we're one voice to the rest of the organization. Our relationship is strengthened because I understand where you're coming from. Whereas done poorly, our relationship is slightly fractured. And every fracture means that we become further apart until at some point we're rivals or adversaries and we're unable to work respectfully together.
All right. Well, you have one last practice of the ally mindset. What is that?
Action and accountability. Because all of this is easy to talk about, but doing it and doing it consistently, that's where the art and science comes in. And action and accountability is around being clear about what have we agreed to do? How are you moving forward? But also taking personal accountability reduces the passive aggressiveness that might happen. But what's my personal accountability for how I'm going to show up, or what results I'm delivering, or what transaction, the spreadsheet I'm working on? Are we clear about our roles, responsibilities, and the handoffs that ultimately make us move forward and better together?
Perfect. Well, as we wind down here, Morag, what's your ultimate hope here for people reading this book?
I want people to make life and work lighter and fun. If you're not having fun at work, and you pointed out in the introduction, we spend more hours at work than we do in other parts of our lives. And so it's on all of us to find the joy, to find the love in action. And it starts with us. Don't wait for others to create it. Define it for yourself. Talk about it with your team. Create that oasis of fun and calm. And then you'll have the ripple effect that I promise, I've seen it happen, will start to infect and strengthen or change the culture within your whole organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a tradition here on the show. So we pose you the leadership love question. How do we lead with practical and actionable professional love in the workplace, day in and day out as leaders and bosses?
So as a British woman, I have embodied the stiff upper lip and the professional mask for the early part of my career. And I've learned that bringing my human to work, letting that mask fall down, is the differentiator. So I challenge everybody listening. Three elements: look up, show up, step up. And you can do this every day, every week, every month. I don't care. Just do it regularly. So look up. How do I feel in my own presence? And how do others feel in my presence? Is it the sigh of relief or the sigh of excitement? Am I happy? Am I sad? Then determine how to show up. So be intentional. Where do I need to turn the dial up or down? For me, I've been talking for a decade about getting fit. Well, this year I finally said, wishing it so is not going to happen. I've got to get back to the gym. And so I am showing up 2 to 3 times a week. I won't say I'm loving it, but I am enjoying it. How about that? So look up. How am I feeling? How do others feel in my presence? Show up. Be intentional. Where do I need to turn the dial up or turn the dial down to get to that emotional experience I want? And then the third one is where you get that grace and space. Did I do my best? Did I do my best to get to the gym this week? And if I didn't, all right, there's next week. What excuses did I use? Well, let's find a way around them so that that new habit just becomes part of how I show up in the world. So look up, show up, step up. One day, one conversation at a time.
That's fantastic. That is wrapped in love for sure. Thank you for that. We bring it home with 2 questions as we do with every guest. Personally, Morag, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
The thing that's tugging at my heart is the divisiveness that is everywhere. That's what it feels like. It's everywhere. And it can feel overwhelming for me. And I'm looking at it and thinking, what can I do? And all I can do is focus one conversation, one relationship at a time. And within my sphere, doing the best that I can do to show up as an ally and as a friend for those around me. And if we're all doing the same, all those circles would connect. And it would be a less divisive place to be.
That's fantastic. Of the last 20 guests that I have had on the show, I would say that probably 18 or 19 of them have reflected on the divisiveness going on in the world, and the politics and all that. And that speaks to a lot of people right now. That's really what's tugging on, I think, all of our collective hearts, is how to dismantle that. And I think we do it by doing exactly what you just said. Right? We have to come to the table. We have to begin to listen to each other. We don't have to agree with people, but we have to at least be present with one another to understand someone else's perspective and then show up with our empathy. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Finally, you close us out, as all guests do, with a key takeaway to keep us inspired. Bring us home.
The key takeaway for me is that you cannot be successful in business or in life unless you are successful in cultivating winning relationships. Those relationships start with you. They then move to others. But ultimately, we are all better together.
Amen to that, sister. All right. Well, if people want to connect with you, where can they go?
All right. Well, the advantage of an unusual name, Morag, M-O-R-A-G, Barrett. You'll find me on the interwebs. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I promise I reply. And you can find me and Eric and Ruby at SkyeTeam, S-K-Y-E, team.com. And that's where you'll also find more information about the books available from your favorite retailer. And the Ally Mindset profile, again, is at skyeteam.cloud/you, me, we.
The book again is called You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One. If you're watching on YouTube, that's what it looks like right there. It's been such a blast hanging out with you, and I've had fun, and you were enlightening and insightful. I learned from you, and that's what we're all about here, having this growth mindset to figure out how to change the world of work, one leader at a time. You did that well today, so thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Keep the conversation going on social media with #LoveInActionPodcast, and also look for my show notes as well as a YouTube link to watch the show on my website, marcelschwantes.com. I'll be sure to include all of Morag's contact info there. And finally, hey, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.